Hello. Going out of the frame, New Ways in Activism is the title of our panel. I'd like to welcome you all. In this panel, we're going to hear the existing methods of activism, whether we should renew them, whether we should change the current forms of activism, how can the civil society make a more participatory process. So we're going to talk about the Turkish and international examples. Goodfortrust.org founder and Presumption Economy Association President Dr. Uygar Özesmi and Amnesty International Campaigns and Communication Director Tarık Beyhan will be with us. The moderator will be Communication and Campaigns Director of the Memory Center, Hakan. Mr. Hakan. Thank you and welcome. My name is Kerem. Sorry, I am the Communications Director of Memory Center, Kerem Çiftçioğlu. So the panel's title is a title that I really like. Actually, I want to say a few words about that title, and then we'll continue with the questions. There are two dimensions of this title. One is going out of the frame, and the other is new forms in activism. So first we will talk about the frame and going out of the frame. This is something that we should truly care about, in my opinion. What could this frame be, or what could those frames be? So we can change this in different ways. It could be external frames. It could be about authoritarianism, authoritarian administration coming with democratic elections and the frames that they impose, and whether we can get out of the frame as civil society, how can we do it? So this is one dimension. And then there are social frames. For instance, we're discussing polarization. We're discussing frames brought about by polarization, like the echo chambers in social media. So in our ways of using the social media, in our ways of using digital technologies, there are some changes. The algorithms and big data, how they're used. So in human behavior, there are these, there is this tendency to go into camps. So perhaps we see it's growing further, it's scaling further, turning into structural problems. And we can also talk about internal frames, like our mind frames and their limitations. There are methods that we think are true. We continue following them because they have become habits until now. Are they going to be valid after this point? We assume that they will be, like how we get organized, how we do advocacy, who do we target in advocacy. So the responses of the past, and its difference from the responses we should come up with today. So one aspect is the frames, and the other aspect is the new ways, search for novelty. In 2004, I started working in civil society in the field of human rights, and I joined the Helsinki Citizens Committee or Assembly. You can actually reach that through their website. It was 2004. So the search for novelty will never end in modern times. For people who want to bring about change, we have the obligation to follow what's going on, and sometimes this can lead to cynicism, like how many times are we search for new ways? But it's a question that we should be asking over and over again. We should keep on asking this question at all times. And actually, we're going to have this discussion today. So, after this introduction, I will continue with my questions. I have a few questions to our speakers. And I will try to make room for your questions. I'll start with the first question. Let's start with the title of the panel and the concepts. I want to start with the concept of new methods. This is one of the terms that we have been using a lot recently. Uygar, let's start with you. What is new in activism? What is not changed? And what do we mean by going out of the frame? I'm not a theoretician. You know, I come from the practice side. I studied the science of environment. I studied birds and insects. So anything that I can say about activism is based on my own experience and what I saw there. I believe that it was 1993. In Göksu Delta, there was this great sand area that goes all the way to the sea. It is the Göksu Delta, and it is such an amazing area with rare birds. They were going to build a vacation site, a holiday complex there. I don't know how they would do it on top of the sand, but they would. And right after that, there was this shrimp farm there. I had never heard of this in Turkey, but they said they will build a shrimp farm. So we started this protest there in order to prevent that. It was the beginning of 1990s, and in this protest, the most efficient source for us was the media, the news in the media bringing this topic to the agenda. That is how we were able to win that campaign. And the activism there was mobilized through the media. That worked in the beginning of 90s. Can you imagine this today? Could this ever happen today? It's impossible. In the beginning of 90s, there was no internet technology. We think it would be there, but in the beginning of 90s, in the beginning of 1994 or something, we had just started sending emails. So the media was very strong back then, and it looks like something has changed since then. And after that, we try to inform the people in campaigns. We talk to the government officials. We try to convince them. So we did lobbying as NGOs. And that is how we tried to realize some change back then. It was the beginning of 2000s. Again, it was effective in 1990s too, but this worked well as a method in the beginning of 2000, and we supported that with media as well. But then, after some time, we saw that this wasn't enough. Why? Because the people in the regime stopped listening to the civil society. And when they stopped listening, the most effective method of activism became the people, the masses. So it became important for people to act. I remember I used to be the general manager of Tema Foundation, and the most effective campaign was collecting signatures on the street. But then, internet was appearing for the first time, and we started a mass campaign. 768,000 people signed, and the technology wasn't like today. Those 768,000 people, we actually screened them, and there were repetitions of names. Some fake names were there, so we cleaned the fake names and so on. It was digital, but there was the offline cleaning process involved as well. After I left Tema and switched to Gülpiz Akdeniz, we saw that those sign campaigns worked. And we got together with people who understood the digital world, and we created this very strong digital signature collection system with authentication and so on. We started a campaign titled "Seninki kaç santim? How many centimeters is yours?" And we collected 825,000 signatures, and it created this immense awareness. And it was also supported by the media. So you just take this signature campaign system as a basis of your activism, and you also support that with multi-channel communication. You go to the billboards outside, you mobilize the restaurants, because if you wonder what this campaign is about, it was a fish campaign. There are these little fish, the offspring. Don't catch them so that they can grow and the fish stock doesn't erode. So we also involved the restaurants. They also participated in this activism. They had those stickers saying, "I support too." And there was this thing called Foursquare back then. Do you remember Foursquare? Raise your hand if you do. Well, it wasn't such a long time before. I believe it still exists. Maybe 5 years ago, people were using it actively. Do you use it now? No, you don't use Foursquare anymore, but people used to use it a lot. So using Foursquare, when you entered a certain venue, you could hear our announcements. That is what I mean by multi-channel. So it wasn't just the signature campaign. You added billboards and Foursquare, the chefs in restaurants, the interviews with them. So when it all got together, when you communicated the message through all those channels, the campaign became successful. And you have to transform with the signature campaigns. How many campaigns does Greenpeace have 1 year? Maybe 3. In Amnesty, how many campaigns can you run per year? No? Okay. No. There is no limit. Well, so these NGOs, we decided to make these signature campaigns on a mass basis. There are these kickstarts. Somebody launches a product, people pay small amounts of money, and then an idea is implemented. So we thought we could do the same, and everyone on the street can initiate a signature campaign. And then we came up with change.org. And together with change.org, everybody could initiate a campaign. It's been there for 10 years. It's not new anymore. It's quite established now. So 300,000 campaigns have been initiated. So that's like 30,000 per year in 10 years. And in total, it's more than 95 million signatures. So all these people actually acted. And that is 9.5 million signatures per year. In Greenpeace, we were very happy we could collect 800,000 signatures. Can you imagine? So there was this mass funding, crowdfunding, which was an innovation. And now we are entering a new period. It's not just signatures. It's not enough anymore in Turkey. Well, it will be enough maybe against companies, because the companies will act immediately. But when it comes to political will, unfortunately, it doesn't work, because the political will doesn't listen to you. And since it doesn't, it's only active in companies. So if the political will doesn't listen to you, what should we do in terms of digital activism? I think this is the main question. I have some ideas, but I'll save them for later. Great. Well, setting up a system, a robust methodology. You know, you created this robust methodology with signatures, and you built upon that. You added some diversity to that, and you were able to place this on top of this robust technology in an efficient way. So there is this novelty in the technology, in the medium, but you actually had this robust foundation. And people coming from the engineering background have great contribution to NGOs in coming up with such systems. This is very important. I want to ask the same questions to both of you. That's actually what I planned. But in terms of time management, Tarık, do you have anything to add for this? And then I'll ask the second question. Well, Uygar summarized it really nice. I have just a few additions. One of the main efforts in activism is, you pretend that in this power balance, you are actually stronger. I mean, you have to create this image. Sometimes you're really strong, you have millions behind you, but sometimes in the media, you just convinced one person and you can have a news piece every week. Like the Saturday Mothers, they gathered in Galatasaray High School, and every Saturday there was news about that. That was happening on a regular basis. And if there was any police violence, this was also in the news. And then the media started to suppress that. So you have to get the power from elsewhere. That's what I'm talking about. For instance, naming and shaming was a method for a while. Just name, shame, so that they'll change. That wasn't the attitude. For instance, torture in Turkey, everybody knew this happened and it exists today. We still know this. But in 1990s, there were some torture claims, and if it was documented, the politicians acted as if they didn't know about that it happened by accidents, and they would just dismiss somebody. They would just impose the responsibility on one single person and get him out of the office. Of course, there were exceptions. Some of them even bragged about themselves for this. But now this method is only working for companies. Companies don't want to be faced with such reputation, bad reputation. But in many parts of the world, when there are rights violations, the governments don't think that this is a major problem anymore. That's why there is need to create new balance of power, and you have to get new sources of power. This is something that needs to change. We also use the signature collection campaigns. We have more than 50 such campaigns every year, I believe. So we use different methods all the time, but in fact, in these campaigns, the number of people, whoever you want to change, the authority or a company, it's important how you communicate this to people. And I think this is what we need to change. The basis of activism is changing something, but unfortunately, we just have to change our methods too if they're not functioning anymore. So all the techniques, and this is true for communication as well, after some time they become lame and they're not interesting for people anymore. That's why you should always find a new method, and it shouldn't look like the previous one.
For instance, one of the most effective images in the 1990s was the image of people walking, protesting, marching together. For instance, it would create an impact if 50 people would go in front of a prison and stand there with their suits on. This would create an impact back then. But if you do it today, maybe they think you will try to make a coup d'etat. So this doesn't work anymore. And we have other examples that I will be sharing later. Okay, then I'll continue with my next question. New ways, we said. So maybe one of the most important dynamics for finding new ways is about digitalization. Activism is very much influenced by the digital age. Some of us were born into the digital age, but you also mentioned some of us were not. So we have gone through different phases of digitalization throughout our lives, and today we are at a very different level in terms of the use of digital instruments. Today, of course, going digital is something inevitable in terms of our activism. We have to be digital, but it's also establishing some boundaries for us, meaning that social media is all about going viral, but then you have the algorithms that put the issue of going viral in the center, but you can't be outside it. But you also want to make meaningful connections. And you need to try to work on making meaningful connections. So we also have the issue of big data being collected and converted into a commercial model. And one of the, or all of the leading technology companies are now investing in big data. So we can say that in a way we have boundaries and risks. So within that framework, how can we interpret the space between digital and non-digital world in terms of activism? Okay, making a link between going viral is directly correlated with this. Let me explain. If a topic goes viral or if it becomes a trending topic, then you reach out to the masses. And then between the masses and what happened, there can be a real link established. I'll just try to illustrate it with an example. For instance, on change.org, you started a campaign, right? About a health issue, for example, access to health rights. You have that topic. When you go viral with that topic, then you are able to reach out to the person who can solve this problem, who is in a position to solve this problem. Then that person gets engaged with you, and then it becomes a real connection, and then the problem can be solved. So going viral might be an instrument of solving problems. Sometimes maybe it's not the case, but it might be. Then the second thing, going viral also makes a flash in the minds of many people. So it just all of a sudden makes some people think about it, talk about it. It's not only about going viral, but a discussion is initiated thanks to this going viral issue. So from that perspective, we can say that going viral is becoming viral is very positive. We don't take it as a negative thing, but of course you have to establish that real connection. Another thing we can see is that in relation to your question, we have online and offline campaigns. If you design your campaign together with both of them, online plus offline, by thinking about both strategies at the same time, then the campaign becomes very effective. So you shouldn't say, I'll go digital only, I'll go online only, I go offline only. No, this is not valid anymore. You cannot exclude the offline world. It's not rational to exclude the offline world, because the moment you do it, you are actually damaging your own activism. You have to think about both hand in hand, remembering that there is a synergy between the two, and you need to build your strategy based on that, taking into consideration the synergic structures between the two. I just would like to add something. When we talk about activism, if you are not manually changing something, you need to have a communication base. Uygar talked about combining online and offline, and this is an average marketing method. You need to be aware of this. You have to become something that people see randomly in their lives. Of course, we work a lot on targeting. I've seen a writing on a wall coming here. It said, what is 6284? Then I remember, if I had seen this writing on Twitter, I would say, okay, I remember the campaign on the law numbered 6284. We had an action, a protest in my association. We were going to open a banner from a building, and one day before we opened the banner, at the entrance of all subway stations in Istanbul and Ankara, we put a sticker with the same writing, with the same slogan on the banner. So if people had already seen the slogan leaving the metro, the subway in the morning, and when they see our banner, they would say, okay, I have seen this elsewhere. So people think sometimes when they tweet something, they are involved in activism. In today's world, we need to face some realities. Before, 100 people were involved in activism, for instance. And if it's not a topic that is directly related to a specific group of people, for instance, workers striking for their rights in a factory, it's something different. But we have thousands of people, thousands of groups of people working all at the same time in the world, campaigning on 4 or 5 different topics to solve their own issues. So it's not possible to draw the attentions of all people to these topics all at the same time. In the past, people would march in masses. For instance, when US entered Vietnam, it was a big deal and people marched in the streets. Today, maybe we have the Ukrainian war issue, but on top of it, we're trying to solve thousands of different other issues. So it's not possible to bring everything to the street. So that's why digitalization is important. I'm still defending the pro-digital side. So leaving a message in the minds of people is always useful. That's why people also criticize the use of memes. For those who don't know, you have drawings like cartoons, cartoon-like drawings. Or you write something on the photograph of someone. That's what we call as memes. So the person who reads it, maybe they're not taking a concrete step on that specific day. Maybe nothing changes specifically on that day, but it might leave a message in their brains that will impact their decisions that they will take tomorrow. So normalizing certain things for people is easier through simple messages like this. In their everyday life, people who shouldn't be working, for instance, for more than 8 hours are working for 12 hours in ready-made garment sector. They work for 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And maybe if you expect those people after all hard work to come home and listen to your 5-hour lecture on human rights, they won't do it. But maybe they'll come back home, see your tweet on Twitter, find it funny, share it with a friend. So what's written on that message will start to make a difference in their minds. A small change to start with. And this is really something that we need to use as a method. It's an important method. So if we try to solve these things, it's different. In the 2000s, people were using lobbying process with the government because the government would listen to people because of the EU accession process. But today we realize that it's not possible. And people who didn't get organized that day are not defending human rights today. So if we had started all the activities at that time, then maybe we would have people to defend the institutions today. So it's not for today only, but maybe for tomorrow it will make a contribution to change. So I think use of such methods is very important. Of course, I don't want to seem like I'm against going viral, but no, that's not the case at all. At all. I totally understand what you say, and I fully agree with what you say. And we always have to think about these things as complementing one another. While I was asking this question, what I had in mind was more about the following. We're talking about polarization, right? So we can maybe focus on this a little bit. Going viral is important in a positive sense, so that at least people will remember it. So we need to look for it. It has to be a part of the civil society engagement and communication. But just as a footnote, we can say that the underlying algorithmic assumptions are also important. A message on one pole is not conveyed to the other pole. We have such a structure nowadays, so maybe we can talk about how we can overcome this problem through hybrid methods, online and offline methods. Uygar, maybe we can talk about it a little bit. You talked about impacting the public sphere, but how are we going to do it? Maybe, yes, through companies, you said, but what about the government? You can't influence the government that way. So can we merge the two sides, for instance, this polarized structure, general masses, and what are the topics that come to the fore once we are able to overcome this polarization in terms of messages, campaigns? What can you talk about? First of all, this is not an algorithmic thing. It's more about focusing. No, I agree with you. I'm not criticizing you. No, I'm not going to say something contrary to what you say. What I'm trying to say is there are other communication methods that are possible beyond the algorithms. If you initiate a campaign on change.org, there is nothing about the algorithm in terms of announcing it to the masses. On the contrary, it's all about how people become active on certain topics. You have the campaign support teams that work on this. It's not like you are using an outlet that makes money based on algorithms. then it's different. But if you are using change.org, it means there is an institution that is there for you to help you succeed. One is a social enterprise, the other one is the god of surveillance capitalism. There is a huge difference between the two, which we need to understand first. And in terms of the algorithmic issues, we have important activists working in this field. We call it hashtag bombing. How it happens is that you have an hashtag under which those who are against change are organized. You work on that hashtag. Both parties do it actually. Then your bubbles are burst. Your echo chambers burst. There is no echoing anymore. So both parties are starting a communication through their hashtags. So once one party does it, the other party also does it. Then they start listening to each other all of a sudden. You might think there is polarization, but let me tell you, the most important barrier in front of polarization is dialogue. If you have spaces of dialogue, then you won't have polarization. So these quote-unquote hashtag wars actually create a dialogue between the parties, bursting the echo chambers. But someone has to initiate this. Another interesting examples of playing with the algorithms is that they did it with the Black Lives Matter movement. One activist built a website and uploaded all the videos there. And the revenue generated by the videos were going to be donated to the movement. Then all the Black Lives Matter activists entered that website and watched that video, all those videos. So their revenues for ads started to fall into that activist, and then those who make money out of your algorithm, actually they started generating money by using the money made by the algorithm. So we can say that creativity of the human mind can outdo all the algorithms. We need to learn how the algorithms work, and then we can come up with some strategies to make advantage of those algorithms. There is a very delicate issue here. Well, the nice thing about a signature campaign is that you say, yes, I am sponsoring this issue, here is my signature. And the aim of signing off for a campaign is that, meaning you show that you are supporting an idea. But if you are now living in an atmosphere of fear by speaking out that you are supporting a certain cause, people refrain from signing off. And then they don't sign the campaigns, and then there is a regime of fear that emerges. All these surveillance mechanisms are there, making the individuals powerless in front of those who hold the power. Unfortunately, in our country, the institutions that combat this, the movements that combat this, are not strong enough. But we shall not forget that this is our soft spot. Meaning, very rapidly in our country, we can use digital activism and all its structures to change this. All the laws and problems and the power needs to be restricted. Otherwise, we will lose our power. So this should be one of our most important priorities. Thank you. We can continue from this last remark. As a methodology, as a message, what do you think? What should be the method that can burst that bubble look like? well, each time I spoke, I said I agree with Uygar. Now I have the chance to say I don't agree with Uygar, because this issue of hashtag is like looking for something in the garbage. Twitter used to be slightly different than the other media. Of course, it tried to increase your screen time, but they didn't do it just like TikTok did. It's not like swipe up and stay. No, it was like giving you your some original content. Twitter was setting you free in a way, and Twitter wasn't trying to create content to keep you on Twitter constantly. It wasn't like they were showing you the content that you didn't follow. Facebook did this at an earlier stage. They wanted you to spend more time on Facebook, so they also showed you some other content that you didn't follow. On Twitter, you see the hashtags now. So they are still working to make us spend time, but hashtags are organized in a way to keep you on Twitter based on your choices. Is it Turkey's agenda, your own agenda? So the algorithm tries to show you the hashtags you might be interested, but most of it is garbage. They are created as garbage through bot accounts, trolls. So they work like a botnet, and they just write random words.
So they don't take the necessary measures either deliberately or they just don't take it because there are 500,000 tweets. After 1 minute, they're all deleted. Then there are those 10 other tweets and the hashtags stay there in the trend topic. Well, we see that. So this hashtag wars thing is not a war that you can win. That's not what I think. This is an old-fashioned method. In the past, mutually, there was this fight and a dialogue, but I'm not even talking about people not listening to one another. 80 out of 100 tweets don't have a meaning. They have listed 10 hashtags side by side, and there is this K-pop singer dancing, and then you try to read what's written underneath the heading. But in terms of overcoming these algorithms, I still think that we have important barriers. We have important opportunities. There are several organizations working towards that. The algorithms help the companies profit, survive, meet their costs for moderation, and it shouldn't lock people into bubbles. We expect those to happen simultaneously. And as far as I can see, this is, with the current state of AI, not something you can guarantee. You can't really do it. With the AI, you can just say, this looks like a hate message, and you can prevent it, but you're preventing other things as well. For instance, during the Ode to Pride March, the police video was banned, and people thought it was the banning of LGBT, but it was actually a banning of the violence views. But then it actually prevents us from announcing this police violence or the support of the university students. It's the AI who does that. You call someone, you send an email, and it's a person who corrects this. So you have to talk to people too. For instance, Amnesty International has this office at the Silicon Valley. And with big technology companies, they discuss human rights issues. They set up a special office for that. So they're exerting some efforts. These algorithms are working against human rights and they can trigger hatred. So they're working hard to fight against that. But it's not just about how we use or guide those algorithms, but the companies should also be open to collaboration. We talked about Foursquare. Why did we quit Foursquare? As far as I can see, people checked in through Facebook, and then Foursquare disappeared gradually. And a lot of people left Snapchat because they shifted to Instagram more. So we cannot make people change platform overnight. We can't say, don't use it, come here, it's healthier. So we have to keep fighting in every channel. And I talked about the companies and what we can do, and we should find something that is always new and that will go viral. These can be some paid advertising. Sometimes you see it on Twitter. There are these specific emojis, or when you press like, it's a different logo. So you can even go all that way. But I don't think that those bubbles can be overcome with the effort of one or two people, because it's an environment that is very difficult for people to talk to each other, especially that's the case for Twitter. Yeah, well, we have a disagreement here. Well, that wasn't my main message anyway. I think you can use you can use change.org. That's what I'll tell you. What would you expect? But what I was trying to say is, if there is a system, there are systems breakers too, and it will always exist. The important thing is continuing that fight, and it's important to, get together in this. The more people get together, the more they use their creativity, the more people fight against something and use the methods of fight correctly, change will be possible. So let's spread hope. That's what I'm saying. I agree 100%. We could go into the subject of hope more deeply. Hope communication, a communication that takes hope as a reference. What should the subheadings be? This is something that I'm really interested in, but unfortunately, we're in the last 15 minutes, so I would like to turn to the audience and ask them, what their questions are. So I see some hands. Hello. My question is about the refugees, this attacked, or popular language through Twitter. I work with refugees, so I have a sensitivity about that. And I did a retweet, and the subject was refugees. They're not guests, they have human rights, so that was my retweet. It wasn't anything radical, actually. But then, in Ekşi Sözlük, there was this criticism or an attack about academicians who praise refugees. So, shaming and naming policy, especially against trolls, how can we be creative with that? I mean, it could be through AI or something else, because they're actually trying to deter you. I now protect my account and I can't say anything I wanted publicly anymore. I used to, but actually I gave up. That's what they achieved. They achieved this with me, but they don't give up. How can we overcome this, shaming and naming creatively? Okay, let's get all the questions and then let's answer collectively. My name is Çağdaş Dedeoğlu. I want to thank the speakers and the moderator. Well, about this online and offline use, I talked about Floridi's on-life concept. There is a suggestion, so we can think about how to translate it. My question is as follows. I don't have internet connection now, but it must be Amnesty International Twitter account or UK. There was the cybersecurity fellowship subject that was brought about in Turkey. Is there any project about that? Well, I'm asking because in the last 10 years there have been hackathons and so on, and everybody is trying to be a data analyst, a data scientist. Everybody wants to be an analyst, but then there is need to protect the other side, for NGOs, for the society. the ethics people, the legal people. This needs to be funded in a way. Is there any study about that? Or do you collaborate with international community? Are there any such plans? Well, I think we can answer these questions, then take 2 more questions collectively. First, what's your name? I couldn't hear, but Çağdaş Bey, I heard you, but Serpil. Well, this name and shame, I don't think it's really going to work, especially if these behaviors don't harm people's life. Their organization may not be supporting this behavior. Well, as activists, what can we do? Though little, these groups are doing this in an organized fashion. And what they're doing is called doxing, All the personal information of the people are being shared and published. So actually, if this is done on a regular basis, they need to be moderated by social media companies. If they are sharing such content, they should be banned if they're doing this regularly. So what can you do as an activist? If you can just complain about this hatred messages on a regular basis. And this is how the software of these companies learn. Let's say there is this account that has hate speech. If they've done it for the first time, and if it's found to be okay, but if you complain 5 or 10 times more, then it is banned. So these companies, we should just make sure that they don't allow this in their own media. And for instance, this refugee rights advocacy to be normalized, you should just stand up as a group. For instance, until the killing of Hrant Dink, people used the word Armenian as a curse, but they saw thousands of people in his funeral and everybody said, we are all Armenians, so nobody can actually defame somebody else using the word Armenian anymore. So people can attack other people who defend refugee rights because there are very few people who are against this. Well, we actually saw this attack. We have a colleague, a former colleague from Amnesty International. He's at the same time running a program in a YouTube channel. He sent a tweet about refugees. They took him as a target. They actually targeted his YouTube channel after that. This YouTube channel was being funded by an organization. They found that organization and they attacked everyone who is getting funds from that organization. So in different newspapers, we started seeing lists called funders, because nobody raised their voice. None of the groups raised their voice against this. Very few people raised their voice, so they beat you when you don't do this. So actually, you should just say this is nothing to be ashamed. It's human rights advocacy. We should create groups to communicate this. I see this in refugee rights, or when there are thousands of supporting tweets when somebody attacks, but when it comes to human rights attacks, there are very few people who defend this. There are very few people, because I believe maybe we think that this is normal. I mean, this is obvious. Well, currently, when it comes to the security of IT, there is no direct work by Amnesty International. I come from that background, so I have the intention to work on that. And we're trying to send fellows, we're trying to spread to everyone. So I hope this happens. Serpil Hanım, first of all, I'm sorry about what happened. there is a company that is in charge here. It's called Twitter. So I think first there is need for a campaign against Twitter here. They need to be named because they need to provide safe environments for us. You're using that space, so there is need to act upon that as well. I mean, how can you be exposed to something else when using such a service? What right do they have? Like if you drive a car and if you hit a wall, because the steering wheel is not functioning, what happens? That car will be out of the market. The same is true here. Thank you. I have a question. I work in the gender area. When I talk to Gen Z, they talk about the Women's Day or Pride marches, and there are some, protests, and our families are worried that we will be detained. They don't want to send us to those marches and protests. And like Tarık said, there are some people who don't live close by, so they can't attend those protests. In the last pandemic, there was this online Pride March. Hrant Dink Foundation also remembered Hrant Dink online, and everybody carried their own slogans. So can't this be widespread in the future? Rather than walking 10,000s of people walking on the street, could it be possible to get together in a platform like Metaverse, hundreds of thousands of people marching? Should there be any work around that? Should I ask my question now? I work in the field of hearing disability. I want to thank you very much for Change.org. We held a lot of campaigns there, cochlear implants and ear surgeries being reimbursed. We had several campaigns, and during the pandemic, we had another campaign. We established some common networks. We collected 9,500 signatures, and it was successful. So unfortunately, the website is not very accessible. It's not very inclusive for people with hearing disabilities because they don't understand the text because the main language is sign language. We cannot upload videos. So perhaps you can add videos next to the images. There is this campaign image that I designed as a graphic designer. The end of the tunnel is dark, and we were addressing the Turkish railway, railway association, but we couldn't upload it. So how does this happen abroad? Is it accessible? Change.org site. Thank you. Sorry, there is no mic used, so we cannot hear the gentleman. Well, first, thank you very much for the feedback. I can't tell you how much it affected me. I'm shaking right now. But I can tell you this. Creating a disability-free change.org is our priority, especially for readers. We have a solution, but when it comes to hearing disability, unfortunately, we don't have something, but I think that was a superb feedback. Let's arrange a meeting together and discuss what we can do. Let's solve this together because it's our priority to have a disability-free change.org. Please reach me. As for Metaverse, well, currently there has been this creation of this hype. There is actually nothing like metaverse. There is this area for players, for gamers. So we should look beyond that hype and we should look at this resistance or digital existence and how we can multiply those. What are the methods of doing this? We should just look at that. First of all, I'm happy that the accessibility question is asked to you. We don't even have it for the sight disabled, but it is among our projects this year. We hopefully will complete it and change our website. As for the digital action, I am not really favoring everything being done in the digital platform. They can be complementary methods. You can march on metaverse, but if you always do it on metaverse, they can say, okay, keep walking on metaverse, don't go out on the street anymore. And when the metaverse is unplugged, we won't be able to work anywhere. So you have to be everywhere. You talked about 2008, but I believe you're talking about the march in 2010. I was among the organizer of that march against internet bans. And we hadn't organized through the internet there. There were some managers of the websites on the internet where everybody could reach. They announced this on their website, and that's how people learned about this march. And I want to commemorate Özgür Uçkan. May he rest in peace. He led that process. If everything is done on the internet, I believe that it will just be, it should be about the internet and digital stuff. I mean, when you talk about starting a campaign on Twitter, it may not be meaningful to march on the street, especially if you do it in Taksim, it won't mean much. But you have to do certain things on the street. People should see this action on the street. They need to interact. Yet some of them may not be able to participate, but we have an alternative for them. So I think that it's useful to have multiple facets. I think it would be problematic just to stay in the digital. Thank you both very much. It really broadened my horizons, and I hope that it's been the case for you. I would like to thank you all very much. We want to thank our panelists. Again, you are going to see a QR code. Please scan it and fill the evaluation form. The next session will start at 4 o'clock. It's about brain research, a new culture of